Well, first of all, thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. So really the aim of today's webinar is to assist all Queensland mango growers with preparing for their upcoming season in light of the requirements that are in place due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, by the time your season starts, the virus is not going to go anywhere. So you really need to be aware of what your responsibilities are and how to best prepare your business for, I guess, to reduce the risk of the virus entering your property and to limit trade interruptions. Today you'll hear from a range of presenters. So first of all, you'll hear from Peter Holden, who's the Agriculture Coordination Officer, COVID-19 with the Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries based in Mareeba. And Peter will give us a bit of an overview of the current state of play in Queensland. We'll then hear from Leanne Kruss, who's the Agriculture Workforce Officer for Far North Queensland, and from Fiona O'Sullivan, who's the Operations Manager for the Agriculture Unit with Workplace Health and Safety Queensland. And they'll talk about health management plans, workplace health and safety policies, and also where to get assistance if you need when developing those plans. And finally, we'll hear from Bree Grimer, who's the Managing Director of Bundaberg Fruit and Vegetable Growers. As most of you will be aware, back in early June, a farm worker who was traveling from Melbourne to Bundaberg via Brisbane tested positive to COVID-19. And the response from, I guess, the farming business, the patients' contacts and the Wide Bay community was judged excellent by the Queensland Chief Health Officer. And Bree and the Bundaberg fruit and vegetable growers were heavily involved in the response. And Bree will share some of the learnings with us today. Before we go into the presentations, just a little bit of housekeeping. If I could ask everyone to mute their microphone and turn their video off, that'd be great. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to unmute yourself and ask during the presentations. You can also use the chat function at the bottom of your screen there. And if you have any technical difficulties, let us know as well using the chat function. If you have any more general questions, we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. As mentioned earlier, the webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel and will be communicated via our e-newsletter, My Mango. At the end of this webinar, you also receive, all attendees will receive a follow-up email with a feedback survey and the slides from today. And that's just a disclaimer. So none of the content that we discuss today constitute legal, medical, or financial advice. So growers or businesses should contact the speakers from this webinar or qualified professionals for information specific to their situation. And just before we start, I just wanted to talk to you about that COVID-19 grower guide. So if you haven't seen it, the Australian Mangoes team, in collaboration with the 3 state departments, develop that COVID-19 grower guide, which is available on the Australian Mangoes website under the resources tab. So that guide is a great starting point with reliable source of information. So if you haven't done so, I really encourage you to jump on our website and download a copy. And before we start with the first presentation, I might just hand over to Robert to say a few words.
Thanks, Maureen. Just a couple of key points from my perspective. Thanks very much for making the time to both participate and contribute to today's webinar. Certainly my take on what's rolling out in front of us, in the general community is a really good example of how we can't become complacent. What's happening in Victoria could very easily be happening in our mango growing regions. And I think it's really important that we utilise the learnings that we've had to date with this crisis to best prepare so that we don't make the same mistakes unnecessarily. And I think today's a really good example of taking the learnings to date, putting them into a mango context, and giving ourselves every chance of dealing with this pandemic as best as possible. So thanks everyone for participating. And I just highly encourage everyone to stay vigilant and not complacent in the months ahead. Thanks, Maureen.
Thank you. So I'll now hand over to our first speaker, Peter Holden. Peter, if you'd like to share your screen.
Yep, I will. Okay, all good? You can see that?
Yes, perfect. Thanks, Peter.
Okay. All right, thank you for the opportunity, Maureen, and thank you, Robert, and hello, everyone on board. Yeah, it's a great opportunity just to provide a quick overview in terms of the restrictions and quarantine and the financial assistance, and a quick reference to the agriculture coordination officers that are embedded within the regions across Queensland to assist industry with the response associated with COVID-19. We only have 10 minutes, so if my presentation seems a little bit rushed, then I apologise in advance for that, but there are good follow-up informations with the PowerPoint presentations afterwards. So let's jump into it. So the key restrictions associated with Queensland, I guess, it's all about risk mitigation, minimisation, and knowing that the agriculture industry in Queensland plays a vital role in terms of not only the Queensland economy, but the Australian economy as well. In some sectors, in a lot of sectors, and certainly the horticultural sectors, we have a heavy reliance on seasonal workers, and they include the temporary visa holders and the backpackers that you're all very familiar with. And because of that, and because the seasonal workers move or can move across the regions in Queensland and state borders and so forth, there is a critical situation associated with the risk associated with the spread of COVID-19 within our communities as the people travel in and between them. Yeah, so I forgot to set my reminder, but that's okay. So please excuse, the text associated with the restrictions here, but it's from the 10th of July, we jumped into a new stage, and things became a little bit more pronounced. And yeah, so essentially anyone traveling from a hotspot is pretty limited in terms of what they can do. But the thing is that there are essential reasons and options available whereby there are permitted travel. So if you're in a hotspot within Queensland, you essentially have to quarantine for 14 days. And anyone wanting to enter into Queensland border, you need a Queensland Border Declaration pass. It's a 5 to 10 minute thing online. You can hop on board. It's straightforward. You go through a series of questions, and at the end of it, you're presented with a pass which you can provide at the border checks. There's follow-up information here at the bottom if you need additional information associated with that. Very quickly, I don't want to step through this, but there are a range of flow charts I'd like to flag with you up front. And this is an example of an employee-based flow chart, stepping the employee, i.e. a seasonal worker, through the various scenarios that they may be placed in, where they've been in the last 14 days, whether they're local and whatnot. And depending on the situation that they're in, they can either stop at the border or proceed through. And I'll let Leanne and Fiona talk a little bit more about these various arrangements associated with the health management plans and so forth. These flowcharts have a tendency to be updated at times, and so there's a link down here at the bottom that will take you to the most up-to-date version. In terms of exclusions associated with various stakeholders, yes, certainly our freight and logistics personnel and the services associated with that, because they're recognised as essential services and provide essential activities, they are permitted to progress through to the borders. We do all need to eat, and that includes the delivery of the all-important essential toilet papers. So, a lot of people don't associate toilet paper with ag, but it really is derived from primary agricultural pursuits. Yes, so there's a quick reference there in terms of the need to retain records of the various activities that you may be involved with, the contacts that you may be associated with over the 14 days. There's a link here, additional link in terms of the exemptions that you may be able to want to apply for. And it's just a little bit more border restrictions. We're up to direction number 9 now. As of 2 days ago, we were up to number 8. And so it's like I said, it's a constantly changing field. And so the likes of, people involved with anything to do with border management, risk management associated with COVID-19, we just have to constantly keep an eye on the checks and the changes that are afoot. So if you want additional information in terms of New South Wales border restrictions, Queensland border restrictions, well, I've included it all here in the presentation as well. To use an example, and you saw an employee example before in terms of the flow chart. This is an employer flow chart. And again, I won't step you through it, but it's really for familiarity so that if and when Leanne presents this and Fiona, you're more familiar with it. But, the onus is on every one of us, the employees, and in this instance, the employer. And in terms, instead of, having to sift through a whole range of dot points and lists of various information, the flowchart is a great way to step you through it as an employer. And just use an example up here in terms of the immediate 14-day quarantine. If you have a worker that is in a COVID-19 hotspot, straight away they're not permitted into it. And at the bottom here, if you have a worker who is more locally based within, say, the towns that you work in, they can progress through using through in a quicker fashion. And again, the link to the most up-to-date information is included here at the bottom of that slide. Just very quickly into the financial assistance. Since the start of COVID-19 pandemic, the Queensland government has pumped out approximately $9 billion, I think. I can't quite see it, but I think it's up to $9 billion now in a range of support initiatives, to try and prop up the Queensland economy and the livelihood and our individual livelihoods. There's a link here with more up-to-date information. But in terms of some quick examples, for small businesses, there's been tax relief at land and payroll taxes, supply chain disruptions assistance, workplace transition scheme, which the State Development Agency is responsible for. There's rent relief, electricity relief for household and small businesses, and more directly related to agriculture. There's, the 1 year water price freeze for irrigators and dam safety cost freezes as well. There's been a $1 billion job support loan scheme that has been made available, and it's just recently closed. And that's assisted something like, I think, 7,000 businesses, 7,000 loans, and something like 86,000 workers across Queensland to this point. So that's been quite significant. There's been rural economic development grants that's been issued by the Queensland Rural and Industry Development Authority. That has been released by DAF, but managed by QRider. And that's recently closed, and that's all about providing productivity and efficiency gains and employment, and also diversification options and opportunities for agricultural businesses. And there's been also a lot of online and social media support through the Queensland campaign to help support local purchasing and whatnot. And in addition to that, recently announced back in June, there's been a $12.5 million economic recovery package announced for the agricultural sector in Queensland. $5.5 million has been focused towards the digital transformation of our ag industries and supply chains, associated with traceability, biosecurity and food safety. And $5 million has been allocated towards e-commerce, because e-commerce has been one of those things that has really had a big tick up in the purchasing of various products across the board, as well as the importance of maintaining exports and air freights and so forth. Knowing that the mango industry, particularly in Queensland, export a larger percentage of Queensland growers export a larger percentage of the mango exports compared to other states. So that's an important thing, that we'd like to maintain the export of linkages associated with the mango industry. And finally, there's a $2 million agribusiness diversification allocated to try and get agricultural diversification going, and that also includes agri-tourism opportunities as well, where it may present itself, and additional linkages here down the bottom. And very quickly, I'm getting towards the end part of the presentation, which is good to know. It's a quick reference to the agricultural coordination officers back in early April. It was there was a pool of agricultural coordination officers that's been announced within the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries across Queensland, and these officers have been appointed to help industries and local governments and various other stakeholder groups to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic activities. And the agricultural coordination officers, we have a different role. Some of us have more of an active role in this space than others, and so they're extension people, research officers, biosecurity officers, and regional development, economic development staff that are spread throughout Queensland. And we're there really to help facilitate, provide assistance to producers and various other stakeholders as much as possible. And we work closely with various other government agencies, and in particular the Queensland Agriculture Workforce Networks. And the best way to seek assistance through the ACOs is to send an email to info@dap.qld.gov.au or call the Customer Service Centre on 132523, and within 24 hours you'll be contacted by an ACO officer. Yes, so at the grassroots level, we have the local and regional engagement through the ACO network and the CORN network, but at the higher level, we, through the ministerial office, we have this thing called the Agricultural Coordination Group, and they're high-level government agencies and peak and key agriculture industry bodies, including supply chain stakeholders as well, and they work with the department at the very high level through the minister to deal and cover all the issues that may be discussed and prioritised and strategised with COVID-19. And an extension of that is that they set up a range of working groups, and the current working groups are very quickly. There's a working group for agricultural blueprint, which is about determining the short, medium and long-term strategies to get the agriculture industry and the local agricultural communities up and running associated with COVID. There's the Agri-Food Workforce COVID-19 Transition Phase Working Group and the Seasonal Agricultural Workforce Operational Implementation Working Group. Bit of a mouthful, but just thought I'd flag that there are grassroots level interaction as well as very high level interactions across the state. And finally, hopefully my 10 minutes should be up soon. There's additional information here that I'd just like to share with you. It's been a flurry of information, I guess, but in general, there's some really good links here that are on online linkages. If you want some general information associated with the COVID response from the Queensland government, there's that link there. There's a direct industry link here for agriculture. Because Queensland Health is really the governing agency that provides all the facilitation of all this. There's a link here with Queensland Health, and there's a federal government link as well. And if you can't find anything else, then certainly there's, a hotline and a hot email that you can send to DAF to send an inquiry through, and you'll be responded to accordingly. And that's really me in a nutshell. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. Has anyone got any questions for Peter? Debbie, I can see your question in the chat, but I think we'll probably keep that one for the more broadly, the broad Q&A session at the end.
Sorry, Marina, I have one quick question.
Mm-hmm.
There was a chart put up there with regard to where your workers come from and what you required.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have no workers, say, that are interstate or international, you do not require a workplace health and management plan, is that correct?
I'll cover that bit.
Or did I misread the expression, the PowerPoint slide?
Charlie, thanks for your question. These will be covered in the following presentations.
No problem, thank you.
Fiona. Any other questions for Peter? No? Well, thank you very much, Peter. We might move on to Leanne Cruss.
Hello, everyone. So a lot of you possibly know me. I do live in the agriculture, in the mango space of Mareeba Dimbula, so I do know a lot of you. For those that I don't know, this is a really good introduction to the Queensland Agricultural Workforce Network. So flick the page, Maureen. So who are we? So in my PowerPoint, it's not very fancy. What I've done is put chunks of information, because you get a copy of this at the end, and then it'll, you'll be able to then all stuff with brainstorm through this, just be able to have that there rather than a fancy picture to go, okay, what did she say, or take notes. So you pretty much don't have to take notes with my PowerPoint. So who are we? We are the Queensland Agricultural Workforce Network. If you hear the word CORN, that's our little acronym. And we're an industry-led jobs initiative funded by the Queensland Government. So the Department of Agriculture state level funds us to industry. So we work for you and we become like a conduit between industry and government and other stakeholders, so that we feed your messages back at that real ground truthing level. So we support the workforce basically, and that's everyone from you as the owner, your manager, right through to your lower level positions and skilled positions. It's basically a capacity of education. So if there's a new topic to learn, basically we will help you join those dots. We will help you provide and find the information you might need, the people or stakeholders you might need, and the workforce that you might need. If you're looking at some of the initiatives that Peter was discussing, when it comes to those funding possibilities that you come across all the time, or the ones that are coming through with diversification, we would be there to help you then decide, can your workforce cope with it? Can you cope with it? What skills do you need to pull off your new diversification project? What would that future workforce look like? So we would always look at your business planning, and what your goals are, and then work out strategies for the people or the human side of your business, and move forward and create growth in that avenue. Keep going, Maureen. I've probably not said everything that's on that page, but it sums it all up, and I'm a bit of a talker rather than a visual thing. So this is us. So I'm all the green. So I'm definitely up in your Mareeba and Dimbulah mango region. I live out west of Dimbulah. I've been in agriculture my whole life, so I'm very understanding of the industry. The other key person for mangoes would be Julia, who's in North Queensland. So she's the pink band based in Bowen. And then possibly you might need the help of Laurel with some mangoes there, not so much down in the south. However, what I want to emphasise here is, if you have a question that you need to ask with anything relating to COVID or education, if it's not really specific to that region, like Mareeba or something, and it's an overview question, if you can't reach me or the person in your area, all of us work closely together. We have weekly meetings, and most of the people on the team could answer your questions. So if you can't find me, if I'm out of range and working, definitely ring one of the others if it's something you really want to know straight away. And that's really what I'm emphasising here. There's not a question that I'm saying or presenting today that the others couldn't answer on COVID. Thanks, Marie. Okay, so another bit of an overview of our services. So we do the people component of agribusiness. We also work with the supply chain. So we need to know too that the supply chain is developing within your region, that they have the workforce that they need as you guys grow and expand. So we look right across and we try and develop value. You hear the word value chain all the time. So we try and help to develop value right across your supply chain as well, and right across your enterprise. And I just like my little comment in that bubble there, because it's really what it's about. You know, a lot of people are hesitant about looking at expanding or developing or scaling up their workforce or finding a more professional person, but sometimes it can cost you more if you don't. So we really look at what is going to help benefit your bottom line whenever we're thinking workforce. Thanks, Murray. Okay, so where do we fit in the COVID platform as corn? And I've probably touched it already. So we really are at that ground truthing platform of industry. We're down here at farm level working. We're embedded into the communities, but we work up all of those chains that Peter was talking about before. So we are a part of the working group meetings at the state and regional levels. I do work very closely with Peter and all of the other ACOs scattered across my region, as do all the other corn officers. So we work as a team, and I wear the hat for industry amongst that team, as does Robert Gray and Marine and all of that when we're in those working groups looking at this. So we are here as a group. You know, if there was a group of you that had the same question, we could do a group teleconference. You know, we've all been doing video and teleconferencing throughout COVID. We are starting to look at what we can do face-to-face. Because I live in your area, I'm more than happy to come and help you nut through some of these problems. I do want you to do a lot of the work, pre-work yourself, but I can come and help create some ideas and move you through practices, because this is a moving beast, and at the same time too, each enterprise is so different. And so your strategies might be different to your neighbours. The rules are the same, but your strategies might be different. And we'll nut through some strategies at the end with Fiona as well. So what I'm going to focus on here is your health management plan, which is the key. And so going back to, next slide please, Marie. going back to the question we had before, so I've brought up these flowcharts again. So basically, you'll get a copy of the flowcharts, and they have also been a moving beast. They've had to change with all the border restrictions. But what we're going to focus on today is the purple second last big box. The purpley maroon second last big box is about what does a workplace health management plan look like, because this is mandatory and it's required for seasonal workers, which I'll give you the definition of in a minute. And we would expect that most Mango enterprises will require a health management plan, because you will mostly have someone that we would class as a seasonal worker as part of your packing and picking crew. There might be a few that don't. So very much everything I say in the health management plan will probably relate to you. Next slide. And so what I was going to point out here is the purple box. So it's just a brief purple. You'll get time to read through the flow charts, but the purple box will give you a little bit of an idea of the data you should collect from your workers as you start to develop and employ those workers. When you're thinking about your strategy, this will give you a chance to get your record keeping for this component ready prior to your employees coming to your workforce. So it's looking at where they've been, and you need to be able to account for this. If someone that you have checked this, you are accountable, and to keep that data in whatever form is easiest for you is what I'm sort of trying to emphasize here. So seasonal worker, what does this mean? So I've put the Queensland Health definition there, the very formal definition, and we'll quickly read through it. An employee or contractor who usually resides outside of Queensland, who holds a letter of appointment for an agribusiness, labour hire firm, commercial fishing business, accommodation or transport business, and travels to Queensland to work in agribusiness or commercial fishing, and travels on an itinerant basis within Queensland to meet seasonal labour needs. So this is looking at anybody that's coming into our state, which is common with our borders open now, could change. It's such a fluctuating beast at the moment. But this also looks at, so it's not just targeting horticulture, so mustering teams, shearing contractors, all of those all come under this definition of a seasonal worker. The second one, an employee or contractor who usually resides in Queensland, holds a letter of appointment, and sometimes a letter of appointment is not so important now with the borders opening. It was prior, and it is vital for any of those people coming from areas that really require that pass into Queensland. If there was a potential worker that won't fit in your low skilled, there's no excuse there anymore. But if there was somebody that had to cross, that's the business leader somewhere else in the country, they would require something like a letter of appointment. Sorry, my alarm's going off. So in other words, I put it in layman's terms down the bottom. Anyone who does not go home to their bed at night under Queensland Health's pandemic rules is classed as a seasonal worker. Okay, and that's the key, other than we are sort of lucky up here in the Mareeba-Dimbula area, because a lot of students aren't studying, a lot of your family members are available over that Christmas, so they would be going home to their beds. So it wouldn't be relevant to them. However, all farms that I've seen have a mixture of both family and some sort of itinerant worker. So this is basically saying you must have a health management plan. Okay, next. I'll go through this because Pete's covered it, and I'm sure Fiona will cover it, but this is why. This is the big why page, and I've just pulled out the main health directives based on why we need this health management plan. The main reason is that you know you need it and you must submit it. So it's, and this is the component that a lot of people forget as they start to create it and they go, oh, I'll finish it next week and I'll finish it the week after, and they never get to submission of this document with Queensland Health. And that for there means that you are non-compliant. So it must be submitted with Queensland Health, and I'll have all of those directions for you. Next. Is it coming up? But I just stick the link on because there's so many components of the health management plan, and I'll lead you straight to the template if you don't already know it. A lot of people would already know this. Whoops, go back. Can you click on the link for me, Maureen?
I don't know if it's going to work. Yep. Can you all see that?
No, it hasn't come up as a share. Sorry, I wasn't sure if that was going to work.
Let me
drive it through in practice. So basically this link will lead you to a template for the health management plan. I'm not sure if you can get it up, Maureen. But this is the one-stop shop page. If you have your own version of what you want to do as a template, that's okay. It doesn't have to be on this template, as long as you have covered all of the requirements that it's asking for you in this template. Sorry, Maureen, I thought it might just automatically come up. It's a very direct link, and what it does on that link also is, there we go. So to the right side of the link, you'll see the Workplace Health Management Plan template, just right where, yep. So you can click straight on that, and the template is there available for you to basically fill in. And this whole page here will have the link for where you must submit that. It's also on the template. So it's all very, very straightforward. A lot of the big writing down the middle explains everything that we've talked about, but the main thing is that you can find the template and know how to submit it. So if you are struggling to fill in this template, don't hesitate to call us Corn people or Peter, but we're definitely there to help you fill it out. Probably can answer a lot of it over the phone. And if we need to come out and have a bit of a look, we've basically been working on this as a team, full noise, with all of the components that Peter mentioned from the onset of COVID. So the Corn officers are well able to help come up with some suggestions for you, some ideas, and some ideas that we're seeing are very, very creative. So don't hesitate is what I'm saying. You're not alone. We have to see that this isn't sort of like, oh gosh, another lot of paperwork we're being forced to do. Unfortunately, everybody is, whether you're in the tourism industry or hospitality, you know how we have to sign in at the coffee shops and that. So everybody's under this pressure. What we're trying to do is say, keep it simple, because the key is that you can implement what you write. Right? And the main part of the health management plan, the message here is risk mitigation. We need to know that you are trying to work out all the possible ways that you can stop cross-contamination of people in your workforce. What this means, and this is the key message, is nobody's here to shut your business down. So it's, there's a lot of myths out there saying, oh yeah, they're going to shut our business down. No. What happens is that when cross-contamination occurs, if someone has a COVID case within their enterprise, they have to then, just like we see on the news and that, look at how many people that person has interacted with under those guidelines of COVID. So your 1.5 metre rule, and being under that, under 15 minutes, and all of those rules that you know of that Peter has sent the links to on his page, they look to see where that contamination has happened. So if your business gets shut down, which it won't, it's about how many people have had to be removed. And that would determine whether or not you can function the next day as a business, whether you can pick your fruit because all of your workers have had to be removed because the cross-contamination was amongst them all. And so we all know the ag industry. It is really, really hard to find, you know, another bunch of workers at short notice. And so depending on your fruit, we all know mangoes, that if it needs to be picked, it needs to be picked. And so if you have not put those strategies in place, you've got that risk then of losing your workforce that has to go into isolation. Okay, last slide. And I'll only just touch on this. I've put a lot of this in words purely so you can read it afterwards, and we will nut some more out with Fiona. So these are some key risk mitigation strategies. Julia and all the other corn girls, we all discuss this all the time. We see it, we've been doing some case studies and some ideas that are coming up. So we're looking at how do we protect our labour force supply chain. So at a minimum, you need to know that some of the weak links are the transport, so the buses commuting, and also labour hire. So labour hire, some of them aren't aware that they're required a health management plan. They are the employer of that worker. However, that worker is also working on your property, so both parts of that equation need a health management plan. So you need to, at a minimum, cite that your labour hire company has a workplace health and safety plan, not a workplace, sorry, Fiona, a health management plan. Fiona will talk workplace health and safety. At a minimum, cite it, but it's really good practice if you discuss with them the strategies contained in both of yours to see that you are protecting those workers from cross-contamination. Another one is encourage the COVID Safe app, because this gives you the efficient, fast contract tracing. The faster that's done, the less risk that somebody else is contaminated by someone who hasn't quite known that they've got it yet. Sign in for all staff, visitors, stakeholders, anyone entering your enterprise, freight workers. If they step off out of the truck and into your thing, you need to keep those records. Data collection, unfortunately, record keeping is key. And there's quite a few others there, but we look at ways of staggering into teams. You know, if you've got a picking crew, don't let them mix with your packing crew and stuff like that, or you'll lose the lot if one of them ends up with COVID, with that contract tracing. Colour coding, all sorts of stuff, putting sanitizer in places you would never have put it before. Daily contact, not long meetings, but just encouragement every morning as the staff comes about their COVID safety. Understand that they must respect it. There are resources out there in other languages, and we are putting together some very good visual resources as well as signage. Signage is key. Barriers are a possibility. And I think we'll nut out a few more ideas at the end when Fiona's finished, and you can fire some of those ideas at us too. But there's a fair good list there, and there's plenty more we can add. And that's sort of me. I'll just end with a funny little slide, just, you know, because we're all probably, oh, sorry, I forgot about this slide. This isn't of huge importance. It's just an overview of all the different departments that are working on this, and in the agricultural level, Queensland Police, Biosecurity Queensland, Workplace Health and Safety, Safe Food Queensland is doing a lot of the work with the abattoirs and stuff, and all of them work together as the compliance team. And last, that's my little finish, because this one I can relate to. And I wish you well in the upcoming season, and definitely get on top of this before the season starts, and don't hesitate to contact Corn.
Great, thank you very much, Leanne. And we've got a few Corn officer on the line. So at the end, we'll probably get them to turn their video on so you can see who they are. And as Leanne said, don't hesitate to get in touch with them if you've got any questions or need assistance with your health management plans. So now I'll just hand over to Fiona O'Sullivan. Thanks, Fiona.
Thank you, Maureen. For those of you who don't know me, I manage the Agriculture Unit for Workplace Health and Safety Queensland. My unit responds to workplace incidents and complaints, and also work with industry stakeholders to promote a safer work practices through the ag industry in Queensland. As Peter discussed, a range of government agencies have been working together along with industry leaders to implement the policy and put practical measures in place to manage the risk of COVID. Workplace Health and Safety Queensland have been part of that, and your industry representatives have really stepped up and taken a huge leadership role. So I thank them all very much for that. It's been a mammoth task to get that policy in place. It's been a mammoth task to try and get the practicalities around it. We think we've got there, but we've still got a long way to go, and everybody has a responsibility, and I really can't stress that enough. Now, seasonal workers, including backpackers and non-permanent residents and temporary visa holders, are an essential part of our agribusiness and fishery industries. And without them, we're not going to get our crops in the ground or picked and packed. We know that, so we really do rely on these workers just so much. In my segment, I'll provide a quick overview of the work health and safety legislative duties and how they apply to managing the risk of COVID within your business, and the difference between the work health management plans and existing responsibilities that all operators have to manage safety risks in your business. I'll happily answer questions at the end of the webinar. So the slide you're looking at the moment, I guess it's important to look at the purpose of these laws, because sometimes people talk about workplace health and safety as this horrible thing that you have to do. And please, we need to look at it through a different lens, especially at the moment with our fatality rates, our serious injury rates, and now COVID upon us. So the purpose of the laws and the legislative instruments administered by Workplace Health and Safety Queensland is to enable the protection, health and safety and welfare of workers. That's for business owners, for people employed, for anyone working within the business. So the workplace health and safety laws require a person conducting a business or an undertaking, otherwise known as PCBU, and you'll see that through a lot of the documentation with workplace health and safety, is to ensure the health and safety of their workers while you're at work. There's a requirement for duty holders to consult, cooperate and coordinate activities with others who also have duties in relation to the same matter, and to consult with workers who carry out work at the business or the undertaking. Now, the workplace health and safety regulation stipulates how to prevent or minimise the risk at work. If there's a regulation, you must do what it says. We don't have any regulations for COVID, but we do have the health directives that have been put in place by Queensland Health. When we're looking at this slide, I can't stress enough the importance of the consultation across your labour hire supply chain and all of your labour supply chain to ensure that COVID is managed. This not only includes your labour hire, but also your transport, how those workers are getting to work, and your accommodation, where are those workers living, and how that is being managed. So slide 3, we've jumped ahead a little bit with slides, but that's okay. We won't worry about going back. It showed some photographs. The photograph talked, oh, there we are. The photograph's just got a few photos there just to have a bit of a look at and bring your mind to this. With over 30% of the workplace deaths occurring and only 3% of the working population are employed in the Queensland farms, we clearly need to stand up and take a bit more action and some really serious consideration. COVID risk management is now at the forefront of that, and it is a really serious consideration we have to manage. Our statistics have been the same for quite a while. Being crushed or run over by tractors, getting caught in or falling from poorly designed or unguarded machinery, contacting power lines, misuse of agricultural chemicals and quad bikes have always factored quite highly across the agriculture sector. Young and older workers have always been more at risk, and we're just asking businesses to please think of COVID as another risk that needs to be managed and put some practical measures in place. So the age-old question we're getting every day, numerous times a day, which health management plan do I need? What do I need to do? So there's two things you have to think about. The first thing is your existing requirements under the workplace health and safety legislation to manage your business risks. Every business has that, and they've always had that. COVID is now another risk that we need to manage. So all businesses need to do that across Queensland. However, if you employ seasonal workers, so any worker, again, that doesn't go home to their own bed at night, regardless of where they've come from, they're going to be seasonal workers. If you employ your seasonal workers, you must have under the health directives that's put together by the Chief Health Officer, you must have your workplace health management plan in place. as Leanne spoke about it and showed you some of those attributes to that, it's a pretty practical document. It's asking you to look at who your workers are, where they're coming from, and what risk mitigation practices you're putting in place. Now, we've also been doing a bit of compliance work in this space. Compliance has been pretty good, but the highest risk areas we're seeing is again in labour hire. So please remember that you've all got that duty to consult across your labour supply chain. So please make sure when you're completing your workplace health management plans that you consult across your labour supply chain. It's an absolute imperative to manage COVID in your business, because COVID's a little bit different. If you miss one of those links, one of those important links, it can put the rest of your business at risk. So the Workplace Health Management Plan is mandatory for any agribusiness, commercial fishing business, or agriculture labour provider that employ or provide seasonal workers for work. So please remember that. I've got 3 circles that have jumped up here. I like to look at these 3 circles. I'm a pretty practical person. There's nothing flash or fancy about these, but it helps you to start thinking about your risk management. Now, I know some of you have got larger businesses and are probably doing your risk management very well, and some of the smaller businesses are doing it very well as well. But there are still a lot of gaps that we see when we're doing compliance activity, not only with COVID, but also regular safety compliance. Think about your people. From a COVID perspective, we want to know where they've come from. We want to know where they've been. We want to know who they're living with. We want to know how they're getting to work. We want to know what they're doing in the interactions within the business. We also want to know the interactions they're having when they're outside your business and what risks they might be bringing in when they come to work. Look at your equipment. Not only is it safe for work, but also is it cleaned in between different people using it? Is it fit for purpose? And does it actually, any equipment you're providing, whether it's vehicles, picking equipment, whatever it is, do the people know how to use it properly? And is it COVID safe, which means has it been cleaned? Then we look at the environment we're working in. If it's hot or if it's cold, or if we're inside or outside, all of those different environmental factors are going to play out different risks for health and safety, but also for COVID. So if we're thinking about our environment, we might put amenities in there as well. So think about the amenities that your people are using, how often they're being cleaned, and make sure you've got those regular regimes in place, to cleaning regimes, to ensure that things are cleaned effectively and managed effectively. Now, there's a few tools to assist here. We've obviously got our legislation and codes of practice and industry standards. The industry standards for COVID have been put together again. The industry leaders here have absolutely stepped up and done a tremendous job, and they've been supported by government to do that. And there's plenty of guidelines there for the ag industry that have been put together. So please access those, because they're there to give you a hand. If they're no good for you, if you need more of a hand, your first port of call is always going to be your grower network. So reach out to those at the likes of Leanne or your DAF people, whoever's around. And if we need to provide more support from government, then we definitely will. So please get in touch with any of us for that. And just on the last slide is some contacts. There's some contacts there for workplace health and safety from the agriculture unit, but also I've got in there the trusted COVID-19 source. This is an absolute imperative. Because we have a lot of people managing data and managing information about COVID-19, it's important to go to the one point of truth. The one tried and tested point of truth for this is the Queensland government website, with the business website. So please, the bottom website you've got there, or the bottom phone number, the 132523, is the absolute trusted point of truth that you're going to find information on. All of the government agencies have their information on there, and the industry guidelines are on there as well. So please go to those. And just recapping on a few of the things that we're seeing at the moment, as far as the gaps that we're seeing in compliance, some of those are that people don't have health management plans in place. Some don't believe they need them. I'd say that regardless of if you have a legislative duty to have one or not under the health directive, The document that's put together for that workplace health management plan is a really complex document. It's fantastic for you to gather all your thoughts and all your activities that you're putting in place and really getting you to think about risk management within your business. I'd urge you to use that, whether you think you need to use it or not. I think most of you will need it. Some people are trying to find reasons why they shouldn't have it in their business, but I encourage you all, if you're employing seasonal workers, you must have it. If you're not employing seasonal workers, please still have a look at that template, look at the documents that sit with it, and use that to manage COVID risks within your business, because it's not just your business, it's your community and it's your family. And we all need to keep COVID safe. And we've all got an imperative role to play. We can't discharge this duty on everybody else. Every individual really has to step up and do as much as they can do to manage this, because it's serious and we have to take it that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leanne and Fiona. Charlie, does that answer the question you had earlier?
Certainly does.
Okay, great. Do you have any questions for Leanne or Fiona?
Me or everyone?
Oh, everyone, sorry. Has anyone got any questions? No?
I have one general question, particularly for government people. Given that our unemployment is so high now due to COVID, why there's so much emphasis on giving people from overseas a job? I know in some areas you don't have enough Australians, but I certainly live in a place where there is, but they simply don't work. Not necessarily related directly to COVID, but yeah, it's almost become government policy to give other people work other than Australians.
I'm happy to address that briefly. Although that particular bit of policy doesn't sit with workplace health and safety, what we've been discussing in all of these groups, the joint groups that are the industry and government led, is that the first port of call should always be the locals. If the locals can't satisfy your business needs, then we go to our seasonal workers. Some of the risks that I've seen when we're doing our compliance work from a safety perspective, especially with those workers, those return workers, which is sometimes might be under the seasonal worker program that return to your business year after year. One of the gaps that I'm seeing at the moment is because we don't have access to a lot of those seasonal workers coming in under the seasonal worker program, we've got backpackers and sometimes we've got local guys, local people doing those jobs, and they're not skilled to do them. I know a lot of people call agriculture workers unskilled labour, and I'm sorry, but I can't agree with that. I think they're highly skilled at doing their tasks, and they do their tasks very well. And when you put someone else in to try and do that job, they can't always do it very well. And some of the gaps that we've seen, for instance, when we've had Tongans who are usually there doing a lot of that grape pruning, and all of a sudden we have little French girls running around the paddock trying to do that. They're putting their bodies under immense strain. They're not doing the job very well because they don't know how to do it. Therefore, they're not getting paid very well because they're on piece rate. So the whole flow-on effect with this is massive and has huge implications. So, and I'm not having a go at the little French girls, because they were the ones I saw in the little town I was in were absolutely beautiful, but they were mortified that, they'd come here to pick berries. They often pick berries and they do a fantastic job of that. But being on secateurs that are a metre long, holding them over their heads, trying to cut down grapevines, they were never going to make enough to live. So please be mindful of your workers and their skills and abilities. Go back to those 3 little circles I've popped up and think about that and managing the risk holistically for those people.
Thanks, Fiona. I might hand over to Bree Grammar from Bundaberg Fruit and Vegetable Growers to talk us through the case study in Bundaberg.
Thanks, Maureen, and thank you very much to yourself and Robert for the opportunity to talk today. I am very conscious of your time, so I will keep this as brief as possible. So as discussed, everyone would be aware that we did have a COVID positive case in the Bundaberg region. And I just wanted to go through a couple of the quick learnings that we had, and I guess some key take-home points for yourselves as growers and also as an entire industry to really start having a think about should this occur on your farm. If you could click, please. So I guess one thing I wanted to highlight here was how very quickly the situation can evolve. So myself and a number of industry groups were advised of the positive case on the 6th of June. That was a Saturday. That same day, I did 3 media interviews. So very, very quickly, media pick up on these stories. And I guess one point that I want to drive home is how important it is to ensure someone is ready to speak to media and they have a set number of, I guess, talking points to go through. So I guess the most important thing for me as an industry representative in the region was to make sure the grower was okay. So they were the very first person that I called. And of course, this particular grower had an excellent health management plan in place. They had shared accommodation, so they had the one for accommodation as well. And so they had an excellent starting point for Queensland Health to be able to work with them and do the contact tracing. We established some working groups with Department of Agriculture. We were meeting every second day to talk through the situation with them. And essentially the farm was closed for one day where all the staff were tested. A pop-up tent was put in place for that purpose. And then they were back operating the next day. They did have less staff because some had been quarantined straight away due to close proximity of the affected person. But the best result that we had overall was that all tests were returned with a negative result. So I guess this is just a bit of a snapshot in terms of some of the media articles that came out really quite quickly. And not only was this, did we see media picking up on this locally, but statewide and also internationally as well. So it's really, like I said, really important to drive home those key messages. And the day that I received the news, I had a link up straight away with Berries Australia because this happened on a strawberry farm, and we agreed on a set number of talking points, and they're the ones that I stuck to. And I guess I just wanted to highlight a couple of those key ones, which I think are really important, I think are something that industries can sort of take on board. So I guess one of the first points was that this was an essential worker travelling for work and that agriculture is an exempt industry. So already you're highlighting why that worker was travelling. At the time, they did not come from a known hotspot area, which again is a really important point to drive home, that the grower had they'd obliged with all of their legal obligations. And this again is a really important point so that the rest of the industry, the rest of the country knows that this grower was doing everything they could to reduce the risk. And I guess probably out of all of it, the most important point that we tried to drive home was that the food was safe to eat. So this is something that can impact an entire industry. It's not going to just shut down one farm. It has the potential to shut down an entire industry. And we've seen this with other food safety concerns. So that's a really important point to get across, that the food is safe to eat. So BFEG worked really closely with Queensland Strawberry Growers Association, Department of Agriculture, and we all liaised together to try and make sure that, number one, the grower had everything that they needed, that they had as much support services as possible. And we also took care of all of the media messaging for the producer. So this took a little bit of the pressure off them. It can be quite difficult for them to have to go through that, as well as all of the testing of their farm workers and trying to work out how very quickly they can get back to production. If we can just go to the next one. So I guess the moving forward after, I guess, all the test results came back negative, it became very apparent that the number of health management plans submitted for the region were not nearly enough for the number of producers in the region. So we undertook, I guess, a bit of a mission to call as many members as we possibly could. We also followed up with email, SMS, and using all of those different types of communications. So we did this, and then Department of Agriculture also did the same thing. So they had a list of producers. So there was a bit of a crossover in terms of people phoning up and saying, hey, do you have a health management plan? Do you need help with getting it filled out and submitted? But I am really pleased to say that the number of HMPs submitted after a couple of weeks rose threefold. So this just shows how important it is for industry groups to get on the phone, provide as much support as possible, and to really, for producers to make the time. it's really important to look at it in terms of it's not just an obligation. This is what will keep your farm safe. It'll keep your family safe and your community safe. The health management plan that this producer had was an excellent one. And because of that, we saw the risk of transmission was reduced overall really quite rapidly. So that's really the best outcome you could possibly have. And then just finally, I just wanted to highlight a couple of those key points that I just pulled up, really around preparation. And so this isn't just for the producers, this is also for the industry groups and the people supporting the growers in their role. It's about protecting your business, your family and your community. It should provide that guidance on how you will respond in the instance that you have a COVID positive case. And also have a bit of a think about what's the minimum number of staff you can operate with. So this farm was only shut down for 1 day, but if it had gone on for longer than that, you need to have a think about what's your contingency plan if all of your staff are quarantined. Really importantly, who will be your media spokesperson? And I guess the next part about that is, if this happens on your farm, do you want your farm to be named? So the producer was very quick to say, I do not want my farm named. Now, it did come out in the media, but as the spokesperson, I still to this day have not mentioned the farm name, and I won't do that, because to me, this is a Queensland health issue. It's not an industry issue. This one wasn't a strawberry issue. It's not about a specific commodity. This can happen in any business, and it needs to be treated as such. So by going through the key facts about what the industry has done to meet their obligations, to comply with all of the regulations and to work with Queensland Health as quickly and closely as possible, then we're keeping the messaging really quite simplified. And I guess it helps the industry as a whole. So have a think about some of those key aspects. As I said, food safety is paramount, so we need to make sure that that messaging gets across. And then just finally, just a small thing to have a bit of a think about is how this will impact on the rest of the industry. So I'm not just talking about the mango industry, I'm talking about horticulture as a general. So we have had a couple of comments come from other growing regions that have said, we will not accept any backpackers coming from the Bundaberg region as a result of this instance. Now, to me, that's a bit of a, I guess, a miscommunication between regions about what each and every person is doing to reduce those risks. But also keep in mind that, it's really important that we stick together as a whole in terms of the state. We make the most of the workers that we've got here, because we all know that those numbers are reducing very quickly over time. So yeah, I think all of the different regions, all the different commodities need to work together, and hopefully that's helped out just a little bit for you. I thought I'd just throw in a nice picture there of one of our local producers too.
Thank you very much, Bree. Does anyone have any question for Bree?
Yes, Maureen. I just wanted to ask Bree, in terms of the 1 day that the farm was shut down, was that a directive from the Department of Health, or was that part of their health management plan, or how did that happen?
Yeah, so that came about really quite quickly. I believe it was a health management directive because they had to do contact tracing, and I guess that was the quickest and easiest way for them to do that. And they did a pop-up tent really quite quickly, and they were able to work with them that way.
Thank you. Any other questions for Bree?
Yeah, me again. Just if you do have to put people into quarantine for whether it's a day, 2 days or 2 weeks, is that at the grower's expense?
At this stage, I believe it is, yes.
Yes.
I think it's also really important to point out that there have been instances whereby workers have turned up to farms. The producer has done their due diligence, they've looked at their paperwork and they've seen that they've come from a hotspot area, and they've unfortunately sent them away. Now, to me, that's a huge risk that worker could then just go to the next producer next door. And if that producer is not as diligent in checking the paperwork, then they're potentially spreading it. So yes, the producer is responsible for the worker once they start working on farm. But I think it's really important that should you come across someone who does have paperwork that reflects they need to go into quarantine, that you let the authorities know straight away.
Thank you. We also had
sorry, Marine, I'll just touch on the question that you did ask. We do work, all stakeholders, at regional and local level too. So in saying that, if there was to be a big outbreak, a big cluster or something like that, we're already working on strategies with the local government, Mareeba Shire Council, etc., as to what that might look like if there was a lot of people that needed to go in quarantine that were a seasonal worker and don't have a home, and it doesn't suit, their accommodation where they're at present. And so those discussions are always happening. We also have to look at what's happening in Victoria and those clusters in New South Wales and go, it's up to everybody to prevent that happening in our area, and we just don't want agribusiness to be responsible for that happening. And if we were to be called the hotspot because a cluster had broken out that was quite significant, what would that impact for our entire communities? Not just the agribusiness, but tourism, everything that stops people coming in and out. It requires work, your quarantine periods for everybody. When a hotspot starts. So if you do know of another farm that gives you that comment of, I can't be bothered, or I'm not going to do one, it's not scolding, it's really just giving those educational lessons that you've learnt today to say, hey, come on, we've really got to do this. We don't want a hotspot area to end up here, and we certainly don't want it to appear that it started in agribusiness.
Thank you. We also had a question from Debbie Nusifora on the chat, and I think that's probably more for you, Leanne. And it's quite specific to, I guess, to a business, but it's about that 4 square metre rule. So it's in the lunchroom, staff who leave together or travel together, can they actually sit together in the lunchroom?
Okay, so this is where I was talking, and Deb and I know each other really well, so I'll actually come and go over your place with you, Deb. It's about following the Queensland health directives, and this is a changing beast. So even those directives sometimes are changing, the square metre rule, etc., etc. So it's about looking at the most current ruling and make sure that you're implementing that in your place. When we talk about can this person go with this person, go with this person, and those teams, it pretty much reflects on what Bree said, what Fiona said, and what I said. It's about what the cross-contamination looks like for your particular enterprise, and how can you reduce all cross-contamination across your enterprise to therefore minimise the amount of people that would have to be removed for testing and for, as Bree explained, whether it be a whole day. Now, I know with it's different with each commodity, and mangoes just can't stay on the tree past the time that you need to pick them in that sense. So you've got to think about the commodity that you've got and the time frame you've got to lose staff. So if that's a really short time frame, then you would be looking at the most severe way of reducing that cross-contamination for the sake of your business and your income this season.
Thanks, Leanne. We have another question here for Bree about that Bundaberg case study. So if the farm was shut for 1 day, everyone tested, then obviously had to start again the next day. When did they know that they were COVID clear, and how long was it before the test came back?
Yeah, so not everyone was required to go into quarantine because they weren't in close proximity. You had people on tractors that never met the farm worker, and so everyone was tested, but they weren't all required to go into quarantine. So they really only just focused on those people that were in close proximity to that particular worker. And the health directive, I think those tests came back really quite quickly. It was within a couple of days. And the COVID positive case obviously stayed into full quarantine for the required time.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for our speakers? Sorry, we did go over time slightly. So I just wanted to reiterate, so the key contacts, so you've got our speakers there, and also the Queensland Agriculture Workforce Network. So please, as Leanne said, don't hesitate to call your corn officer if you need any assistance with developing your health management plan. I will be sending out the template along with the slides for today. Yeah, and I just wanted to thank our speakers again. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And I think that's it for today. Thank you very much. Thanks for attending, and we wish you all a fantastic mango season. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.